Right, let's get started. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second of two consultation webinar sessions that are taking place on the vision for the future of the Elvetham Hotel and Estate in Hartley-Wintney. My name is Oliver Deed, and my consultancy ECF has organised the public webinar sessions and the consultation materials that you may well have reviewed for this project on behalf of Jastar Capital. And I'll be your host for this afternoon's session. Before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to run through a couple of quick pieces of housekeeping. The session is going to run for about an hour and it will finish at 1 p.m. We'll have about 35 minutes of presentation from the various members of the project team, which will be followed by an interactive question and answer session. And you can submit your questions in one of two ways. You can either use the Q&A function and submit your question in writing, or there should be a raise hand function, which will allow you to notify me that you want to speak, and I can bring you on to talk and to ask your question of the project team. And once we do start the Q&A, we hope to get through as many questions as possible. The third notification is that we are recording this session and a copy of it will be placed onto the project website as soon as possible. So on the panel this afternoon, we've got the following individuals, some of whom are going to be speaking as part of the presentation and others who are on hand to deal with questions. So speaking to the presentation today will be Josh Brushfield from Jastar Capital, James Williams from RPA Group, Daniel Cummins from Heritage Information Limited, and Andreas Kraus from Kraus Architecture. And we also have the following members of the team on hand to answer your questions. So we've got Dorian Crone from Heritage Information Limited as well, Jose Pino from Kraus Architecture, Nazumi Azar from Jastar Capital, and Rebecca Jubb from Bell Cornwell. And Joss is going to speak in a little bit more about the experts who are on the team and just give you a bit more information about how they're supporting this project today. And then the objective really of this session is to provide you with an overview of the vision and the investment plan into this particular site. And at the end of the presentation, you will have opportunities to provide your feedback, give us some ideas, and also to ask your questions. But before then, I'm going to hand over to Josh Brushfield from Jastar Capital, who will start the presentation. Josh, over to you.
Thanks, Ollie, and welcome everyone. Just to give you a bit of background before we move into the detail, Jastar Capital bought the property Elvetham Hotel and Estate because we could see that whilst it had been a bit unloved and underinvested for some considerable time, we believed that there was potential to bring it back into life and to create a sustainable long-term business. Nice to see that life is always throwing googlies at you, and COVID came out of nowhere within a few months of our purchase. But rest assured, we remain committed to our original plan, and we've worked very hard during the period since we bought it in late 2019, doing preparation work to ensure that we bring forward plans to establish the sustainability of the business, whilst respecting the heritage of the site and moving the customer experience hopefully into the 21st century from somewhere in the mid-1970s. We've put a lot of work into our heritage investigations in particular and design work, and you're going to see that a lot from the conversations that we'll have in the next hour. And we've got two specialists here from our heritage consultants who are absolutely fascinating on the subject. If you want to read more, as part of our very detailed research, we've actually done a book, a full book, which a free copy is available on the website in PDF form. And so you can read all about the history of the estate that we've discovered through our research and investigations. Now, we're expecting to invest well over £10 million in the hotel, both in restoration and in heritage, and in enhancing the facilities for residents and non-residents to enjoy. And that last bit's quite important. So previously this has been a conference centre and a hotel, but largely a walled estate that looks inwards, not outwards. We're looking to change that, and this is why this consultation with local residents is so important. We want you to come and celebrate your family celebrations, your cream tea, your dinner out, your spa visit with us in the future. We want to look outwards, not inwards. That being said, I would like to introduce you to the team that you can see on your screen. We have Jastar Capital, which is the business that I work for, which is the owner of the hotel. We have Kraus Architects, who are the specialist architects who have taken the restrictions and the information from the heritage, and then managed to mould around that the plans that make it all work and do it in a way that creates beauty. We've got Heritage Information, who have done the massive amount of detailed understanding of the heritage and the setting and the landscapes and all that stuff. That means that we don't do anything other than improve this important historic estate. We've got Bell Cornwell, who are planning advisors, and Ollie is here from ECF, who are running this for us. I'm going to hand over first to our project manager, James Williams. He actually isn't from any of those companies. He's from our project managers, RPA. He's going to talk now and explain the issues that we face before other people move on and talk about the solutions we propose. So thank you very much, and over to you, James.
James, you just need to unmute yourself, sir. You've forgotten. There we go.
The pitfalls of webinars. Thank you, and thank you, Joss, and hello to everyone. First off, I just wanted to give everyone an overview of the existing areas of the estate, something that you can see with the visuals on screen at the moment, whilst also highlighting the challenges the team have been facing. I will then let the rest of the team expand on these, running you through the proposals each in turn. So the first primary challenge that we've had is to ensure that all our proposals still protect the heritage of the existing buildings. Central to this idea is the sensitive restorations of the main hall as well as the stable court buildings. The next challenge was then, how do we breathe new life into the various different assets on the estate, essentially for a wider public benefit, such as bringing the St. Mary's Church and the estate gardens back to their former glories. The last central challenge was, how can we expand the offer the Elvetham provides to its clients and also to its guests, whether this is by providing more accessibility for disabled guests or specifically making use of poorly performing areas such as with the water tower and the cottages. So moving to our next slide, we outline our vision and how do we look to achieve all these aims? Well, we'll look to sensitively repair and restore the main hall, the stable court, and the estate gardens, refurbishing existing bedrooms as well as providing new, whilst also renovating all the general public areas. Additionally, we will look to repair and adapt the water tower, the St. Mary's Church, and car parking facilities to bring these up to a 21st century standard. Furthermore, we're also planning to develop new offers on the estate, this being through the development of a new event centre, spa, and new forms of guest accommodation, as seen with the implemented cottages and eco-pods. Overall, we're looking to get people to come and celebrate this terrific asset as something that we can all enjoy in the local area. I'll move on and let my colleague Daniel outline the heritage and history of the whole site and run this through with you.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies you can't see me, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Just to reiterate what James and Joss have said, this vision and the aspirations have been informed fully by the heritage significance of the site. And this has been really from the earliest phase following the Jastar Capital's purchase of the hotel in late 2019. Dorian and I of Heritage Information, we've undertaken extensive research at archives and libraries, detailed examination of all the fabric of the buildings and the landscape, for which we brought in a specialist colleague of ours who's an expert landscape. And this is really a highly significant group of heritage assets and listed buildings within a registered landscape. And so this really had to be the starting point in understanding the significance and the history of the site. And one of the first documents we produced was a 200-page assessment of significance for each element of the site, which covered the buildings and the landscape, and a detailed archaeological desk-based assessment. And these documents were designed to set out the opportunities which were presented to repair, restore, and to enable a much better appreciation and understanding of the significance of all these buildings and the landscape. And this was very much the starting point for the project and for the formulation of the proposals to achieve the aspirations as set out by Joss and James. And so moving on now, myself and my architect colleague Andreas, we're going to introduce each of the projects projects, just providing a little bit of heritage background, and Andreas is going to outline the architectural response. So we start with the Grade 2 star listed Elvetham Hall, which is before you. There have been a number of phases of building on this site, from the medieval period, a fine Elizabethan house, and a small country villa in the Regency period. But the existing building is an example of a remarkably intact country house dating from the early 1860s, very much in the high Victorian Gothic style of architecture by the prolific architect Samuel Sanders Toulon, one of his finest country houses, demonstrating all the picturesque grandeur of the Gothic with broken elevations and towers and turrets. There's no symmetry at all. There's no regular building line. It's one of these buildings which architectural historians either love or they hate, and it's probably a nightmare to design anything around it because there's virtually nothing to come off, no symmetry at all. As well as the fine exteriors, which you can see here, there's some fine interiors of the principal rooms. Some of you may be aware if you've visited them before. There's painted ceilings, stained glass, stone fireplaces, and floor tiling, all by leading Victorian craftsmen. A number of Edwardian additions took place during the early 20th century, which you can see here in the bottom photograph at this north elevation. There was the billiard room, a library, and also a chapel. And the chapel is a particularly splendid example, which is very much a hidden gem of the house. It's very little known. It's tucked away behind the main stair. But unfortunately, it's been used rather much as a storeroom and an office in more recent years, and there's been no public access and virtually nobody knows about it, which is a great shame. You can also see in this bottom photograph some later additions dating from the 1970s. On the right-hand side there, clearly of much lesser architectural quality, not appropriate to the high architectural standard of the hall. And as well as this, there's also some later additions in some internal courtyards. And taken together, these later additions tend to obscure an appreciation and understanding of the historic fabric, the distinctive detailing, and are somewhat visually intrusive. And so following our research, we found that there were a lot of opportunities to enhance a better appreciation and understanding of this highly significant listed building. Thank you, and over to you, Andreas.
Very good. Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon. We have been working with Jastar Capital for over a year now on the proposal for the new Elvetham Hotel. And one of the challenges in working with such a historic asset is always to be very careful to identify locations where the existing buildings could be extended and altered. And that's very much why it's taken a year really for us to develop the scheme that we are presenting to you today. My team and myself, we have studied the existing buildings in great detail and have modeled them in 3D on the computer with intricate details to enable us to develop designs that are appropriate and sensitive. Obviously, we're working inside a very large team of consultants. 15 consultants are supporting us, including obviously the heritage team that you have met, and also a landscape team and many other specialists. At the main hall, we have focused principally on 3 areas. Firstly, the back of the main hall, where there are currently a number of store areas, and also the 1970s extension that Daniel just mentioned. And we rationalized this into a new rear extension that is using Toulon's architectural language and materials. And this allowed us to create 10 rooms, 4 of which are syndicate rooms. Syndicate rooms are rooms that can be used as a hotel room, but also for meeting spaces to be hired out for hotel guests and the public. What we also managed to achieve within the 10 rooms is to provide 3 accessible rooms, which would have been very difficult elsewhere in the building, given the existing level changes and also the historic building fabric. The second intervention that we looked at was the chapel, where we are proposing to restore the walls and the ceiling of this Edwardian chapel and making it a public an event space that is accessible to the public and to hotel guests, and it can be used, for example, for private dining or smaller events. And the third intervention was the courtyard, where there's currently the male cloakroom located. And we thought this was a real shame because with the WCs being facilitated elsewhere, one would be able to provide a fantastic outdoor breakout space that is immediately adjacent next to the library and the Oak Room. And we saw that as a fantastic way for the guests to experience sort of the interior and then also the exterior of the hotel, which in the typical visit to the hotel currently is not possible. So we are really exposing sort of two hidden gems here. One is the chapel and also the internal elevations of this courtyard. If we move on to the chapel, what we can see here on the left is the use of the chapel today. It's on the upper level. The balcony has been extended through, and the floor has been formed. There used to be an office, and on the lower floor it's been used as a storeroom. And the images on the right-hand side show some of the original splendor of this Edwardian chapel. And the section shows our intentions to restore the architectural details of the walls and ceiling, and to create this small event space that is accessible to everyone visiting the hotel. Moving on to the staple block, and perhaps Daniel can give a short heritage overview for this part of the project.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. Yes, this is the Grade 2 listed stables, the stable court. I think it's quite clear that it's very closely related in its architectural style to the hall. It was also designed by Toulon during the early 1860s. It was used as the stables, the coach house, typical arrangement of first floor accommodation for grooms and various staff members on the estate. However, since the 1950s, it's been used as conference centre and for accommodation. There's very little left internally in terms of original fixtures and fittings. It's been virtually stripped out. There is a courtyard with a number of later extensions dating from the 1980s, 1990s onwards. And these, I think what's significant is that these additions have all been contained within the courtyard, because I think it's clear from the external elevations that the intricacy and complexity of the architecture, it's very difficult to make any additions to the outside, and therefore in the past extensions have always been confined within the former stable yard, which is enclosed. And I'll hand it back to you, Andreas.
Thank you, Daniel. As Daniel mentioned, at the stable block in the courtyard, there are several extensions which date back from the 1950s, 1970s, and the 1980s. And this meant that the courtyard is no longer symmetrical as it was once conceived by Toulon. And we saw that very much as an opportunity to rebalance the massing composition inside the courtyard and to restore a level of symmetry. And this addition that we are proposing provides 7 additional hotel rooms and is treated with the same materials and the language of Toulon to really complete this rebalancing operation. None of this intervention is visible from outside the building or from within the estate. And it's being provided obviously in the context of other extensions, and it restores the symmetry. Furthermore, on the inside of the stable block, we are proposing an internal refurbishment to provide high quality hotel rooms. As part of this internal refurbishment, we're also proposing an external glazed corridor, which you can see in the image on the upper right. And this allows views through of the existing facade. If we move on to, yeah, St. Mary's Church.
Yeah. Yes, this is the Grade 2 listed St. Mary's Church. It predates Toulon's work on the site, although Toulon did do a little bit of embellishment on the spire, as you can see on the right-hand side there in the picture. It actually dates from 1840, built in the neo-Norman style. But there has been a church on this site, historians think, since at least the 11th century, serving Elvetham village and the manor house. The church contains some fine early 18th century Colthorpe busts and memorials, the Colthorpes obviously being the family who owned the estate until the 1950s. There's a splendid medieval piscina, which is, we think, the only medieval stonework left within the church that was retained when it was rebuilt. There was formerly a splendid reredos at the east end and a number of very fine fixtures and fittings. I think it's important to realise as well that even though this was a church very much linked with Elvetham Hall and the Colthorpe family, it still remained a parish church for the villages around. And there is a Grade 2 listed war memorial just outside the south porch. The church has been redundant since the 1960s, and it was stripped of all its fixtures and fittings at that time, which were sent to other churches in the local area. And subsequently, or unfortunately, it has been used since the 1960s, firstly as a lecture theatre, then a squash court and a workshop, all of which has been very bad news for the limited fabric that was left after the church was closed. All that's left now are some fine early 18th century Colthorpe busts and the medieval piscina. Everything else of really great significance has gone. Fragmentary. So yes, with the squash court still in place, it's almost, you cannot appreciate the architecture of the interior, the space, or any of the surviving fabric. Most of the stained glass windows have either been lost or they've been severely damaged. And perhaps most crucially, there's no public access. No one's been able, really, members of the public haven't been able to go into this church since it was closed during the late 1960s. But we've understood that it's still of some local interest and some local significance, with specific links to the war memorial and the churchyard. So we saw this as a tremendous opportunity to be able to repair and restore both the space of the church, to be able to appreciate its architecture and its surviving significant fabric and its fixtures, and most crucially to enable a better appreciation and understanding of its significance by raising the level of public access for hotel guests and also the wider community whose ancestors may have visited this church and been buried here. Thanks, Andreas.
The St. Mary's Church is going to be opened up to hotel guests and the public as an accessible event space. We are exposing the historic details of the original church and are conserving these. The new event space will occupy the entire nave without any subdivision, and will include lighting and AV to allow this space to be used for many different types of events. The new WC facilities are designed as a freestanding object in one of the side entrances without impacting the existing walls and ceilings, so that it is sympathetic to the design of the existing interior walls and features. Externally, there's currently a path which we are trying to re-level to allow wheelchair users access to the St. Mary's Church event space, but also the World War II memorial. Back to you, Daniel.
Yes, so you can see before you now, we've moved to another part of the site. This is the walled garden. It's part of the designed Grade 2 registered landscape, and on the right hand side you can also see the garden walls, which are Grade 2 separately listed. What you can see now is actually a creation of the last 50-60 years, in that the definition between what was a formal landscape and a functional landscape has now been lost. In the background, where you can see a more elaborate stone wall at the top of a bank, was actually a formal upper terrace garden, which was separated and defined from the more functional walled garden in the foreground by a garden structure or a peach house. Nothing remains of this formal garden anymore, apart from the elaborate walls you can see in the background. It's now somewhat of a bland grass bank, which is completely open to the walled garden. On the left are the glass houses. These are really fragmentary remains of once extensive network of glass houses in this area. They were historically extensive with a frame yard as well to the rear, which is now the car park. These survivors are in a semi-ruinous condition and have been much altered over time. And the main area of the grass, which was once the walled garden, there's nothing of the historic horticultural landscape character that would have once defined the space, used for cut flowers and for fruit trees and for growing vegetables, with formal paths running between gateways in the walls. All this has been lost. And so again, I think this presents an opportunity to breathe some new life into this area and to be able to reinterpret and to reinstate part of what was a formal and a functional part of the landscape. Thanks, Andreas.
The Elvetham Hotel currently lacks a dedicated event space for weddings and for functions, which is why in the past the previous hotel owners would put a marquee at the rear next to the orangery, which of course is not ideal for hotel operations. It's not ideal for the guest experience, and it also created some noise issues. So we worked hard to find a suitable location for an event space to cater for this requirement. And the solution that we are proposing is to hide the event space in the landscape bank that Daniel just described, where the former peach houses were located. So that it is therefore not visible, yet it receives daylight through light wells from the ground level. The only part that is visible above ground is an elegant glass building that is inspired by its footprint from the original peach houses, with the formal garden and the surrounding landscape being brought back and being planted with flowers, fruit, and flowering trees. What was important for us was to create a transparent building above ground. Also, I mean, in one way to link it visually back to the peach houses, but also to allow the view through to the garden wall. Secondly, another design requirement that was important for us was that the new building above ground would not block much of the main hall view, and all of these we have achieved in the sort of in the image on the right. If we move on to the spa, we've considered a multiple location for the spa, and the spa obviously has to be close to the main hall, to the main hotel. It cannot be too far away because obviously it's intricate to the hotel operation. And so when we visited the site and we studied strategic locations, we found the glass houses as one of the ideal locations. We found it also ideal because it allowed views across the landscape, so that when one sort of unwinds and receives a treatment and relaxes in the spa, one can look out into the landscape. But we went one step further. We also brought into the design of the spa through internal, let's say, glass houses, green areas. So we brought the landscape back in, and we again created a visual link to the previous glass houses. And the image on the left is one of these sort of views that creates this reference to the glass houses and links the spa to the gardens in its surroundings. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. Yes, so as I mentioned previously, the gardens are Grade 2 registered. You can see here, especially the two photographs on the right-hand side, they're divided between a series of formal gardens and pleasure gardens. They're really defined by the design of the early 20th century prolific landscape designer William Goldring, and he was responsible for much of the structural landscaping that you can see at Elvetham today, such as the sunken garden, the formal terrace, the azalea garden, a water garden in the pleasure grounds. And this has been assessed by our specialist conservation landscape colleagues as probably the most significant phase of the landscaping. However, although much of the structure of this remains, it's somewhat tired. There's been extensive loss of planting, a loss of horticultural character and definition, and areas such as Goldring's azalea garden and the water garden have almost disappeared. They're virtually, you can't really appreciate them at all in the landscape of the pleasure gardens. So this presents a really good opportunity to breathe some new life back into this landscape, to better reflect it as it was conceived by Goldring, offering a number of designs which reinstate and reinterpret his original designs, whilst also enhancing the settings of the listed buildings within the site. And there are a number of other listed buildings in the site, apart from those we've already discussed. One of these is a very attractive and picturesque gardener's cottage, which was also designed by Toulon during the early 1860s, which doesn't form part of this application. And there is also the water tower, which you can see in the photograph on the bottom left there. This was also a Toulon building, with a number of later additions surrounding its base. It's really quite a landmark building, its height, its robustness, and it has almost a church-like quality to it in views from around the site. However, this is another building which is very much underused. In fact, it hasn't really got a use at all. It's in poor condition, but nevertheless, it retains many of its original interesting features and workings relating to the water tower, such as its original tank, its pumping equipment. And therefore, we feel, again, this is another great opportunity to be able to repair and restore this interesting and unusual building, and to secure a long-term use for it and long-term conservation by some form of creative adaptation, whilst also enabling more people, the public and guests, to be able to come inside and to be able to appreciate and understand some of the unusual surviving fixtures and fittings which are currently completely hidden. Yeah, thank you, Andreas.
Thank you, Daniel. We're working closely with an ecologist and a heritage landscape architect. And as Daniel said, we're really trying to breathe fresh life into the gardens and into the estate. And foremost, by properly maintaining and managing the wider estate, as well as setting up a long-term plan for all the gardens and the planting. We're also keeping and maintaining the croquet field by next to the hotel for guests and the public. We're also enhancing and extending the network of paths throughout the estate, so that one can enjoy leisurely walks, maybe after a green tea at the hotel. A new front gate is also being proposed. You can see this on the right-hand side, which is inspired by the historic gates within the estate, which I'm sure you know, the ones that are relatively close to the church. Catering to families, we are also proposing a small number of eco-pods to provide individual accommodation set within the beautiful landscape of the estate. You can see an artist's impression in the right-hand upper corner of this board. In this example, the eco-pod is clad in mirrors to reflect surroundings and therefore blend in. If we go to the next slide, please. The historic water tower that Daniel just explained, with its fantastic verticality and presence, is now disused, and we are looking to create a small event space at the top floor in the former water tank, which is accessible to hotel guests and the public. And below that, we are creating a number of hotel rooms that are vertically stacked, as well as in the later additions at the ground floor. All of the original plumbing features, the beautiful cast iron stair, will be retained and revealed, and they all will really emphasize the vertical character of this fantastic water tower, and will preserve it. The verticality and the design of how these spaces are being proposed was really the conceptual driver for this. The water tower and the gardener's cottage are arranged in a small estate-like village, which we're looking to extend through the addition of a small number of cottages that are modeled in their massing on Toulon's gardener's cottage, but are a modern idiom of the historic cottage, so to speak. They will also provide family rooms for guests, and these new cottages will replace the later additions that are not very appealing of the so-called bluebell and heather cottages. By maintaining the surrounding landscape and trimming back the overgrown landscape, we can reveal the gardener's cottage to views in the throughout the wider estate. At the same time, we can manage how visible the cottages are in this area. If I hand back to Joss for a project summary.
Thanks, Andres, and
Yeah.
thanks, Daniel, as well. So just to summarize, we're looking to restore and invest in the estate so that it's on a firm footing for the future. Within the context, if you look at the other country house hotels like ours, and with facilities like ours, they're generally bigger and they have better facilities because they've been more recently invested. We're simply trying to compete on a level footing, put it into the 21st century, to include a range of accommodation that can be used by families, increase disabled accessible rooms, create event spaces where people can come and have fun and celebrate and enjoy the estate. We hope that you agree that we've done it in a way that has a design that is in keeping with the estate, and by doing so we can create this secure future for the estate. I'll now pass back to Ollie to wrap us up.
Thanks, Joss, and I just direct participants to the indicative timeline below. The process moving forward in terms of next steps is a planning application will be submitted later this month, and we're closing the portal for feedback on Wednesday, the 10th of March. So hopefully with a determination of the planning application this summer, work can start in autumn 2021 with a series of completions on the various different projects taking place in 2022. And hopefully individuals have had a chance to visit our website, elvetham-vision.co.uk, and they can review this video at their leisure, and obviously get in touch via the feedback form, which we've published there as well. So without further ado, I will move into questions. And just to say, if you want to submit a question, please feel free to do so in writing. We haven't had any through so far, but I do have a couple up my sleeve to ask the team. So Dorian, I'm going to bring you in first. Hello, Dorian, how are you doing?
Yes, hello there.
Good. The first question that I want to ask you with your heritage hat on is what you think the sort of biggest challenge was when approaching this site from a heritage perspective.
I think the big challenge really with these buildings is the impression is they sort of go on and it's like fairyland, but actually the reality is these buildings are extremely difficult to extend generally. And so what we felt was the best way forward was to try and extend almost internally within courtyards, etc., to have minimum impact on the stunning skylines and the exteriors of these buildings. I think I mentioned the other day event that these are very secret buildings. People are not so aware of them. And the challenge, of course, here is to try and breathe new life into them and to try and energize and provide new activity to a hotel that has been a bit like a sleeping beauty for many years, that needs to be revised and needs to now become alive again. So I feel that's where it is. It's the combination of difficulties to extend externally and yet desperate necessity to provide new facilities and rooms, etc.
Thanks, Dorian. And we have had a couple of questions submitted. I'm just going to mute you, Dorian. There we go. We've just had a couple of questions submitted, which I'll go through. And I think I've also got a raised hand as well, so I will get to you. The first question that we've had in is as follows. Are there any plans for the courtyard of the coach house? It is currently a car park. Will it remain so, or will it be turned into a formal garden? Who's best placed for that one in the first instance? Andreas or James? I'll bring one of yourselves in for that particular question, or both of you. Any plans for that courtyard at all? James, on the spot.
Might be better on the architectural front, Andreas, but I mean, I can lead it off if you want me to.
I don't mind. Yeah.
Well, I think in terms of the central courtyard, above and beyond the extension that would be done on the east wing, the central courtyard itself would be repaired and maintained and brought back in terms of its general condition. But there's no significant changes to change the central area to the courtyard, above and beyond bringing in improved access to the rooms that surround that area. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Andreas.
No, I think that's enough. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can I just say to answer the question, there will not be a car park anymore as it is today. I think that was the core question. Yeah, that was it.
So Oliver, it's going to become a courtyard really, as the stable yard was originally, with sets reinstated. So it will recreate its original character, and I think that's where it's going.
Well, 4 of you have answered, so hopefully that's a satisfactory one for that attendee. So I'm gonna tick that one as done. This is more on the operational side, so perhaps Joss and Nazumi, I'll bring you in on this. We've had an attendee say that they're due to get married at the site at the end of the year. Congratulations to that person, who I shan't name. Can I expect it to be in a building site? So I think that's a question around how will the current operation of the hotel coexist with any construction work that's ongoing. That might be one that we follow up after this. So Joss or Nazumi, I can bring one of you two in.
I think it's Nazumi. Would you mind taking that one? You'll need to come off mute.
Good afternoon. Answer to your question, the main house will not be a building site, and throughout we expect to open the hotel on the 29th of May, and the main house will remain a refurbished hotel, a hall, and it will not affect the formal gardens, and it won't affect the view of any events taking place. So this year, I think this year the plan is the schedule subject to planning. Depend when we get the determination. We will the phase 1 of the refurbishment process is the stables, which will be completely isolated, and which will not have no works or the building. It will not be a building site. There will not be a view of a construction site.
Great.
But
thanks, Nazumi.
Perhaps if the person wants to get in contact with us,
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll talk them through in more detail exactly how it'll work. But rest assured, we're used to undertaking works without guests noticing.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've had a couple to that effect. So anybody that wants to get in touch with us afterwards, the address is info@eltham-vision.co.uk, so we can pass on any of those sorts of inquiries. I'm going to actually go to the floor, I think, and we'll try bringing some people on, because I do have a couple of hands up. First, I'm going to bring on Paul. Paul, I've just allowed you to talk, so if you unmute yourself, yeah, please.
Fine, thank you very much. Two points. There used to be a clock tower on the court building. I wonder whether there is any thoughts of replacing that. And secondly, with the expansion of this site, the other facilities will also be under strain. And I'm thinking of things like sewage, power, gas. What plans are there to improve those, particularly the sewage, given that the site is not on main drainage?
Thanks, Paul. I will put that to the team. So first on the clock tower and that item, who wants to come in on that? Potentially Andreas or Dorian. Dorian, how about you first?
Yeah, very good. Yes, we're aware of the clock tower, and we're discussing with the local authority how we might be able to handle that one, and whether there is the opportunity to restore it or not. So that's ongoing.
Great, thank you, Dorian. I'm sure we can update in due course as that unfolds. I'm going to bring in on the general question around infrastructure, probably James and maybe Rebecca Jubb as well from Bell Cornwell. So, or anybody else who feels that they want to answer that one. So, James, I'll bring you in first.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think as with any development, we obviously have our MEP consultants in the background that with any of the concepts that we're going through, we're essentially making sure that the service provision for all the areas that we're looking to the estate would be upgraded accordingly. So in terms of how we would do that with the event space or the spa or any of the upgrades to the buildings that we're doing to the stables, for example, we've got all those elements in mind in the background, and they will be supplementary to our proposals that we'll be looking to submit. So those elements are very much something that we are aware of and are planning for.
But I just ask to give a slightly more direct answer on the sewage question. When we bought the hotel, there was a rather Heath Robinson homemade sewage plant down towards the river, which it quickly became evident was out of date and no longer fit for purpose. So as part of this, there's a new plant in which will cope with all of the development proposals, as James says, and bring it into the 21st century. So yes, we're investing in the infrastructure as well as in the pretty bits.
Thanks both. And James, what's an MEP consultant? I don't know what that is.
Mechanical, electrical and plumbing. So anything that's related to air conditioning or the electrics of the building, or as I say, with the plumbing and sewers.
There we go. I hope I'm not the only one that didn't know what
that
was.
No, thank you.
A couple. I'll just go back to the written Q&As, and I do have another hand up. The first is around the pool within the spa. Is it going to be big enough to be a swimming pool or more of a plunge pool? I think Andreas, potentially you might want to answer that one.
We looked at the size of the pool in considerable detail, and what we came to the conclusion that it's really within a spa setting, and therefore the sort of the fitness aspect of doing laps wasn't really critical. So it is more a plunge pool. It's long enough to do a bit of swimming, but the main purpose is a plunge pool, really.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I have another hand up, which is Tim. Tim, I'm going to allow you to talk. Tim, you should be with us on stage. If you just unmute yourself, hopefully you're able to. Potentially not. Just ask you to unmute. If not, I will go back to
yes.
Here we go. Hi Tim, please ask your question.
Yeah, I'm the local district councillor actually, and I'm also the guy who stands on the sits on the planning committee. Couple of points. Most of my questions have been answered because I was interested in particularly in sewage disposal and waste in general. What are you going to do about refuse and all the detritus that comes out of a hotel of this size? And I noticed that you're going to put these store areas into new accommodation, and have you got enough room for all the storage stuff that goes around on this on a site or on an operation such as this?
Thank you. I will bring in Andreas in the first instance, but team, feel free to answer the question if you feel you have the expertise. But Andreas, potentially around this, Joss as well, feel free to, and James. You're on mute, Andreas.
With regards to the storage facilities, we are obviously working with a very experienced hotelier here, Jastar Capital, who have a number of hotels, and we've been working closely with them to understand all the storage and sort of the back of house activities that go on a hotel across a site like this. All of these operational requirements have been considered, have been tested, and have been multiple times reviewed, which Joss can, of course, agree to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But perhaps I'll just pick up. So, for example, if you look at the layout of the event space, towards the back of the event space, you suddenly realize how much back of house stuff goes on, and you've got storage rooms, and you've got serveries, and you've got staff corridors, and so on and so forth. So within the design, when you go to a hotel, you quite often see the front of house, and it all serenely is like a swan gliding across a pond, whereas behind the scenes you've got a lot of activity and a lot of space devoted to that. There's still plenty of space for that. If we look specifically at your question on waste, within the area where the existing car park is, just down from the hotel, whether it's within the former frame, I can't remember what Dorian called it, the frame yard, where there used to be horticultural frame houses back in the 19th century. There is an area reserved there for waste, so it will be consolidated there and then taken away by our contractors.
Also on the waste, one could say that there were multiple rooms in the hotel that were used for waste collection and waste storage. And what we have done is we have streamlined it and reviewed the processes together with the hotel manager, with Nasumi, and the entire Jastar team. And this has come to the proposal that Joss just described.
Great. Okay, thank you. There are a couple of other questions. One is, will kitchen facilities be implemented in the water tower to cater for the function room on the top floor? So, Andreas, is that
Yes.
part of the plan?
What we want to provide is very much like a kitchenette or a finishing kitchen. There won't be, let's say, proper cooking. Everything would be prepared in the main kitchen at the main hall, and then be brought to the water tower for the event, and then only brought up when the event is taking place.
Great. And another question: what are you implementing with all the projects to make the hotel sustainable? I.e., any green initiatives? And I'll probably throw again, Andreas, feel free to come in on that one, and you might want to talk about the eco pods or another initiative, and Joss as well, just from a general perspective. So Andreas, to you first.
Yeah, Jose, do you want to maybe jump in on this one?
Yes, sure. Good afternoon. We're trying to improve on all the existing buildings where possible to reduce the energy consumption. In the stables, for example, it's always difficult in listed buildings, but we're trying to, in a less intrusive way, to address the energy consumption of all the buildings. In the new builds, they will be constructed to the higher standards in terms of energy efficiency.
Yeah, just to reinforce, this is always the difficulty with older buildings is how do you do it without damaging the fabric of the building? But you know, great strides have been made, particularly with LED lighting, in terms of reducing energy consumption within the hotel sector generally. I'm not talking about us specifically, but the entire sector is moving in the right direction in terms of sustainability. So great strides are being made, but it is difficult, particularly around the listed building elements.
Thanks, Joss. And then in terms of, I've just had another question in on how will people get from the main building to the spa and the conference centre? Will this be a covered walking route? Probably, again, one for you, Andreas, potentially, or Jose.
Jose?
There will the connection or the people will have to move through the exterior. There will be, in the case of the event center, a connection at the back of the house, more for services and for people catering between the two buildings. But as for the hotel guests, it will be all about the experience of going for a walk in the outdoors and around the park.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've covered off most of the written questions. I think Paul, who came in earlier, still has his hand up, so I'll see if he's got another question.
No,
Paul?
thank you. I'm just taking it off.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. Well, I shall I'll give it 5 seconds or so, or 10 seconds to allow any more answers. Yeah.
Just to say, I note that there's another question from somebody about their wedding,
Yeah.
but only just now, so they may not have heard earlier on. Just to say, please do get in contact with us, and then we'll explain in detail how we're going to ensure that your wedding is as perfect as it can be without being disturbed by any works that are going on elsewhere. So we're good at doing this, but have a chat with us so you can be reassured, because it's a very important day.
Just to echo what Josh, my colleague Josh just mentioned. As Josh said, we are experienced hoteliers, and we've done similar projects, larger projects in London, up to 460 bedrooms, and we will phase it in a way that customers or events does not get affected, and this is why the program and the schedule becomes a vital piece of information for us, and that's again we are led by when we get the planning, and then that's when we could address these issues. But to answer to your question, absolutely there will be no visibility of a construction site or building site, and please do get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that any of your questions are answered, and that your wedding and the most important day of your life will be as wonderful as this beautiful building.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, and we've had a last minute question in, which will be the last one that I'll ask, which is generally how will you make yourselves competitive with several other quality hotels in the near locality? So Joss, I think that might be one for you.
Definitely one for me. So this is, I mean, it's actually a crucial question, and drives the entire strategy. So if you look at our competitor set in the wider local area, they have on average 109 bedrooms, and we're at the moment 72. And so what we're looking to do is simply bring ourselves up to 103 of core hotel bedrooms, plus a small number of family accommodation, for example, in the cottages and the eco pods and so on. To essentially be on a level playing field with them, and also to put in the event space for weddings and for functions and for corporates to use, that essentially again makes us competitive on a level playing field. Most country house hotels will have a spa, so again that's a requirement. That's what our guests and local residents would expect us to provide. So what we're simply trying to do is bring it from where it was to being competitive alongside everybody else in the local area.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's a really good note to end on. So I'll just say thank you to all of the panelists for joining us this afternoon, and everybody that's participated and come along to watch the presentation and ask questions. The next step from our perspective is if you could log on to www.eltham-vision.co.uk. We do have a feedback form on our site. We will be uploading the video of this particular recording. So if you have any ideas or suggestions or burning questions that you weren't able to ask, then feel free to do so after this session. But I'm going to draw things to a conclusion and say thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.